Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, Masechtas Gittin daf Chavav. We're going to begin on Chavav Aleph by the new Mishnah. Says the Masnisan, Hakoisiv Toisvi Gittin. In the event that a sofer wants to pre-write a get, and he writes the tofes of the get, says Rashi, Shesofer who v'noitel schar gets paid, v'writes shehu mezumanim lo. He wants to make sure they're prepared. Pamim she'adam balo soichroi hu torid b'shtar sacherim. Let's say someone wants to get divorced right away, and he's involved in some other activity. So if he has part of the shtar already written, it won't take him that much time to finish it up. So if that's what he does, he needs to at least leave these parts that are not written previously, because these things have to be specific for the person, and it has to be lishma, for the man's name, the woman's name, as well as the place in the zman, makam zman. Okay. However, when it comes to shtari milva, when it comes to a sofer wants to do the same thing when it comes to a loan, I just look at this Rashi. Sarich sheniach makoim. Let's say you have someone that wants to borrow money. Lo yomer harini kaisiv miyad. I'm going to write it immediately. V'aniach makom hazman. I'm going to write the time. Lavadoi shlo yehi shtar mukdam. Elasar sheniach makom haloiva b'malba v'mois. It's not just an issue of a shtar mukdam. They have to make sure that you don't write the time, but all the other things as well. You have to leave a place for the lender, the borrower, and the amount of money that's being borrowed. Afal gav dolekel mecha shlemidi gzer shtaris atu gittin. Okay. So that's the reason why, as we're going to see now in the Mishnah, that shtari milva, when it comes to a document and a sofer writes for a loan, really the whole issue when it comes to a loan is only makam hazman, because we don't want there to be a shibud, on karka, on land, before the actual loan took place. However, as Rashi says, it's a gezer atu gittin, so we don't get confused. So the same din will apply when it comes to a shtar, that you have to leave the place also for the people involved, and also the money, even though you already knew in advance that this is what took place, because you overheard it before they even came. And then the Mishnah says shtari mekach, when it comes to not just loan documents, when it comes to purchasing of properties, for example, you need to leave a place for where the buyer's name is makam amoicha, the seller, makam amois, the amount of money, makam asada, the name of the field, location of the field, or makam azman. You also have to leave place for the time of when this transaction took place. And it says memnei hatakana. Gemara is going to explain what is that referring to, the takana. What was the institution that was placed over here? Yehuda place of a kulan. Yehuda says no. All these are puzzle. Says Rashi, even if you left all the places that are stipulated, it's still possible. Apparently, that's not good enough. Rabbi Lezer on the other hand, says it's okay. Of course, you do have to leave all these different places mentioned above in the Mishnah. He says that you can't do this when it comes to Gittin Nashim. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, "V'kasel l'shma," it has written l'shma, and Rashi says that gazrin behen toifus atu toyif. So even if you wrote the parts, like the typhus, but if you start writing some of the get, we're concerned you may write the entire get, and including the names and the things which are specific to having to be lishma, and therefore when it says a kasav law, that the issue could end up being that, again, you end up writing the whole thing shlo lishma. Says the Gemara, Amar Bihud Amar Shmuel, Tsar sheniach af makoim. You also need to leave a place for the last line of a get, which says Harit Mutar Sochaladam, that you're mutter to all people. That this is also considered to be the ikr of the get, and therefore that also needs to be written later on. You can't write that before. Rabbi Lezer, and we're saying that this is in the course of Rabbi Lezer, Edi Masira Karti. When since he holds Edi Masira Karti, he doesn't go after the Chasimos, but rather he says it's good. The witnesses is Eid Masira, which means that when it says v'kasav law, he says that that's referring to the actual writing of the get. Says Rashi, it's not going on the signatures. The chasimas edom enu el medivri seifrim. They take an oil, as we said many times. The whole purpose of the signatures is only take an oilam, but it's not really the ikar of the get. Therefore, v'chi kasav v'kasavla, says Rashi, mashma de ikar krisus koi dehainu kol hani de amran, that the entirety is on the ksiva. So therefore, utsricha, we need this case. What is the tzricha? Says Rashi, Shmuel ukmi hani tlas. Says Tami Rabbi Lezer. The fact that we say that these three stam mishnahs are like Rabbi Lezer, we need to mention all of them. What is that? Ein kaisen al mechuber, the notion that you cannot write on something which is attached, because it's the kasav v'nasan, not the kasav v'kasav v'tolish v'nasan, right? V'katzatz. So, and that's a case where you only wrote the typhus while it's mechuber. So again, he's geyser typhus. Again, atu the tyref. So the typhus atu the tyref. So that's one case. And also the koksher and lichtoiv, that everyone's allowed to write the get. And this is referring to chereshat v'katan. So we said that's only that they only wrote the tofes, so therefore it's kosher. And the third case is v'kais, says Rashi, v'kaisev taisvi gittin kulu akaminu shmul Rabbi Lezer. So which is referring to our Mishnah here. So all of them are like Rabbi Lezer. So I need to mention these cases. So tzricha, what do we need them for? Diashmi inan hakamaisa, regarding to the get which is written b'mechuber karka. So bahi hudi iko ukam Rabbi Lezer. Maybe only there does he hold like Rabbi Lezer. The Katani in Kaisvin, it says clearly ein Kaisvin al mechuber. So the Katani Kaisvo, and then it says afterwards that you wrote it. Says Rashi, v'hadar tani kisv al mechuber kosher. So on one hand it says you can't do it, and then it says it seems to be like a chumrah that you can't do it, but really technically you could. So it was a stira. What is it? Can you write a get if it's mechuber or not? So So it must be coming to tell you that it's l'chatchil. We don't want you to do it at all. We don't. But b'diavad it works, but it's a gezerah again, because if you write the typhus, then you may end up also writing the tyref. So that's the reason why we established the Mishnah over there like Rabbi Lezer, because there was a stira in it. It was hard to understand how to read it otherwise. However, the sefer that says that everyone is kosher to write the get, and then it says in kiyam haget el b'chaismav. It says the kiyam haget is with the signatures. So that sounds not like Rabbi Lezer. That sounds a lot like the sheet of Rabbi Meir, right? That they could actually seemingly write the entire get. Not that, like Rabbi Lezer, who says that, oh yeah, what does it mean? It only means that they're able to write the typhus. Well, the Mishnah sounds not like Rabbi Lezer. So therefore the chiddush is that we're saying that even in that case, even though it sounds like Eidi Chasima Karti of Rabbi Meir, we're still established it like Rabbi Lezer, as we said before over there. Now, V'iyashmi inan ba'hahi, if you only mention that case, so hahi nami equal Rabbi Lezer, there's still wiggle room to potentially say it like him. Avulha imam but a saver Rabbi Lezer. But over here it seems the Reish is clearly not like Rabbi Lezer, because the end of the Mishnah quotes Rabbi Elazar. So if we're quoting Rabbi Elazar already, it must be because the Reisha is being chaylik with it. Because why is he only mentioning his name? Obviously the Reisha, which is the Stam Mishnah, shouldn't be like him, because if it was him, then why is his name being mentioned? His name shouldn't be mentioned at all. So it must be maybe the Sefer is Rabbi Elazar, but not the Reisha. That's why he needs to mention all three cases. So he said that these different things were done, and again, it specifically mentions it by Shtari Mekach, So the Gemara asks, my takana, what exactly was enacted over here? So the Gemara says that this. Rabbi Yochanan, there's a few answers. This is going to be question 11. Hakaisev taisvi gittin sarach shaniach mimnei takana, my takana. So there's three answers. One is mimnei takana cipher. There's a takana for the Sefer, says Rashi. Hatir lichtav typhus shol shema. We're nice and make it easier for the Sofer, because again, as we saw in Rashi before, since he may very well end up being involved in other activities and someone wants to have a get written, he's going to say, I'm sorry, I don't have time right now. So the guy may end up leaving. So he wants to make sure that he has Gittin available, so let him write at least some of it before the guy comes. So that's the kind of cycle. It says Rashi, Hetir lichtav typhus shel shema. That's the reason why we allow the typhus of the get without the names and those types of specific details. Let him write all that stuff. Rabbi Lezer, he back in the morning, and it's according to him. The truth is, because he says kasav lo shema is on the ksiva, you shouldn't be able to write anything. However, the Rabbanan again made it easier for the Sefer to be able to have Gittin available, so they were lenient. Says Rashi, if it wasn't for that takana, we would have been strict. After all, because the kasav law is a din deraisa that has to be l'shma, so therefore you would think that means the entire get, or we should certainly be geyser ha to ha. But the reality is we don't, because of takana, so that we want to make sure that for the takana seifrim. Rabbi Yehuda pois of a kulon. Rabbi Yehuda says it's possible by all these cases, even if you did everything, because gozer typhus at the tyref, gozer stars at to Gittin. He's very strict, and he doesn't care. He doesn't want any mistakes possible, so therefore he doesn't want anything written at all. Rabbi Lezer, so when it comes to Gittin, he is strict, because typhus ought to tyrev gazar. He says when it comes to a get, we don't want you to write anything. However, stars ought to Gittin lo gazar. A person doesn't have to worry about a star, because we said the only issue of a star is a star mukdam, as we'll discuss in a second. But other than that, it's not an issue. So that is answer number one. That the purpose of this takana is actually a kula for takana seifrim. Okay. Weiter. Shenem Rabbi Kasav law. So v'ha kiksiv law tarefudachsiv. When it says the kasav, that's going on the taref. So how do we understand this? The taref again is the specific name. Says Rashi. Debikra krisos ksiv the hainu taref. That's referring to the specific people. The hechiyof Rabbi Lezer mined lameser typhus. So why would you think to answer the typhus? Because of that. So on this, Ella Ema Mishum Shnever Kasav Lo L'Shema. That you should add a little bit and say, because it says a Kasav Lo L'Shema, says Rashi, Lo Tema Shnemar Damash Mamine Yolef. We don't learn it from there. El Mishum Kalaimer Mishum Shnemer B'Tayrif. When it comes to the Tayrif Kasav Lo L'Shema, Gazrin and Tayrif Atu Tayrif Typhus Atu Tayrif Diraisa. So it's Alsa Gezerah. Okay. As we continue the Chavav Mid Beis. So the Gemara says, Kasher B'Lezer B'Lezer. So if that's the case, we actually have a stira, because as Rashi says here, Reisho K'maskar B'Lezer Masho Kaisa Taisa Gittin. The Reisho says that Taisa Gittin is allowed, and the Seifa says Chutz Megittin Nashim that you cannot write anything. You can't have anything pre-written on a get. So the Gemara says, as we often find many times, that Trey Tanoim believed Rabbi Lezer. It's just two Tanoim, Aliba Rabbi Lezer, whether or not he's Geyser ha to ha. Rav Shabtai Omer Chizkiya Mishum Katata. So he says the reason of the takana, here's a different answer, is because of quarreling. What does that mean? Rameirhi. Really, it's like Rameir. Now, Edichasimakarti means that the kasav law l'shma is on the signatures, not on the ksiva, which apparently, according to Rameir, it shouldn't need, any of the get shouldn't have to be written l'shma. You should be able to write anything. So if that's the case, if the whole get could already be pre-written, the zimnin the shamolei l'seifer, the kakasiv, maybe they're hearing a sefer, he's writing something. The savar ihu, and he's thinking kaimer le v'havile katata b'hadei. He's thinking, you know what? There's a katata, so let me just use this get. Says Rashi, Mneatakana, Diktani Lavel Hatera, the type Sikai, Atzrach Sheniach Kamim Katata. The whole idea is that maybe this guy got into he's angry, and he's like, oh, there's already a get here, it's already pre-written, it's all ready to go, just give it immediately. So we want him to have a moment of calm. So therefore we say, no, you can't just take a pre-written get. Part of it could be written, but else this takana, we don't want a person to just immediately get divorced. So he says it's the takana, the concern of agunos. So, what is the takana of agunos? So this is really potentially different. You could maybe read it not like takanas kata of the katata, rather pumfakert, that the whole notion and Amr Rameir be Amr Rabbi Lezer. So we can look at it either way. Amr Rameir, it could be like Rameir Diamede Chasimakarti, which means the truth is the get could simply be written already in advance, because Rameir only holds the lishma is on the signatures, not on the writing. Therefore, the whole get could have been pre-written. The zimna de havale katata b'hadas. We mentioned again, this could be similar to katata. They got into a fight. V'rasachala, got upset. V'zarkla nahaleni gives her the get. And then she's like an aguna, which Rashi says kishima gareshes. She's divorced, but she was supposed to be. She really should remain married. So it's an interesting, potentially the way you could read this is that even though she's divorced bavadai, saying that that's the case over here, it sounds like, so she could still be an aguna in that obviously she could marry someone else, but she doesn't want to marry someone else. She wants to remain married to her husband. They got into some little fight, and all of a sudden they're divorced. So therefore, that could be the reason, similar to what we said before, and therefore it's like Rameir. That's what it means, agunos. Which, again, it's a little bit shtickle difficult to understand if she's divorced, why she's an aguna. Again, it could just mean that she really wanted to remain married. So Amrullah Rebbe Lezer, they made Masira Karti, or you can say, no, it's like Rebbe Lezer, that Uvedinhu Devil type is Namil Lechtaif. Again, he holds that Kasav Shema is on the writing, and therefore, really, maybe everything should be written Lishma, and not a single thing should have been pre-written. However, maybe that he's about to leave, and there's no sofa around. So this fits in a little bit nicer, is that the notion that if he's like, I'm going to divorce you if it's easy for me, but if there's no sofa around, I'm not going to waste time trying to find him. I'm not going to sit around. And therefore, if it's at least partially written, therefore it could potentially avoid the issue of an aguna, which is an amazing thing. Again, we see the notion of how we're constantly concerned of agunos. Question 11. So the answer, what exactly is this takana? Either it's takana sofer, so that we allow the sofer to write the typhus of the get shalol shema, and that's like Rebbe Lezer, or it's because of katata, that we aser to write the tyrif of Gittin like Rameir, even though Rameir really should allow the whole thing, but because of katata, we don't want them to get divorced so fast, or because of tukanas agunos, as he says here, Oshet sarcha haniach shema isha shlo yamel garesh ukrameir, o lichtayv typhus shiemsim zuman Rebbe. Okay, so that we saw. All right, weiter. So the Gemara continues and says the following: Umakam hazman. So you're supposed to leave a place for the time, and that's for everything when it comes to all documents. So that's the case. Even if you get divorced from Erison, which means you didn't actually consummate your marriage, so nonetheless the din still is that you have to write the zman on the get, and you can't write it before. Now, I can understand if you're already fully married. So, what is the reason for a shtar muktam that we pasel it when it comes to a get? So, one is basachoso, which we saw already. Basachoso is he'll give let's say he's married to his niece, he's going to give his wife a get without a zman and say that she was divorced, even though she was really married to him. So this way, she was mazana through Eishes Ish, and she'd be Chayiv Misa, she'd be Chayiv Chenek, but this was a way of avoiding that happening, saying, oh no, I divorced, she was already since divorced. So Nisuin makes sense because you're fully married. When it comes to peros also, it's the same issue, is that he's entitled to peros, he's entitled to sell the fruits, but only once he's married. Again, there's a machlokas if it's even the shas ksiva or later. So the point is that if in fact the writing of the get doesn't require zman, so it's going to be unclear whether or not he really had authority to be able to sell those fruits. And therefore, again, it's going to be connected to a shibud if there's indentured properties, etc. To element erison when it comes to basachoso, it's still a death penalty. Let's say it could be a nair hamarasu michayim skila. So that makes sense why it's zman. Elamandim peri erusa mis le peri. When you only had erison, you don't have right to her peros anyway. So if you divorced her b'shas erison, according to the opinion that says the whole issue is because of peros, so then you shouldn't have to write a zman. So Amrav Amram hamnilsa shamin meida'ula di'ermim b'sham tekanas vlad v'yadanim ma'nihu. So it was brought down as a tekana for a child and didn't know what this is referring to, which means, what is that talking about? So there's no child in this situation since there was no, it was only erison. So they didn't have bia. So obviously there's no child in this picture. So that's probably what we're talking about. It says Rashi, "Demai vlad yeshul urusa." There's a whole issue by erison of a vlad. What does that mean? What's the kind of a vlad? The kiban the shemaita. Once I heard l'had desanyo aimer chasu get l'urusasi. Write this get for the woman that I had erison with, likishech nisa garshena enu get. From when I marry her, I want her to be divorced. So that is not a get, because that's what's called a get yashan, says Rashi. In order to be able to have nesuin, so when you had bia with her or miyachid with her, says Rashi. So that's not acceptable. So you can't write a get and then be miyachid with her and then give her the get, which in this case would be the situation, because erison only took place. He writes the get, but he doesn't want to give it until after nesuin, which means he already had bia with her. That's a get yashan, so it's possible. Says Rashi, to get yashan who shematis aber. Maybe she'll end up getting pregnant upon marriage. People will say that the get came before the child, and therefore this child is not really was not conceived when they were married, but it was conceived afterwards, because the the get was given before. It was written before. Because people think it was probably given the same day it was written. So since the get was written earlier and only given later, so she was seemingly first divorced and then got pregnant. Even though that's not the case, that's what's called the get yashans, to avoid that potential issue. So that's what's referring to when it says there's a tekanas vlad. So at the time of erison, it's possible that the get was given, not given but written, and therefore that's what ended up happening. Yomer ula matam. So what's the reason for this? That this get is possible because there shema yomer gita couldn't live na. So academics there shema yomer gita couldn't live na. So we're going to say the same thing over here. That we're not going to make any distinctions. That when it comes to erison, if you wrote the get b'shas erison, so we're also going to say the same thing. Says Rashi, masnisin mishum hachi sarch sheniach makom zman af l'toifis harusa. We always write the time of the divorce, even for an arusa. Shem yichtav zman bo b'yoyim, because maybe it was written for that day. And then maybe this is the case. Maybe he won't divorce her until after she gets married. Yomer below kedushin uksuv nisabro leach gerushin upagamu mishmacha. It's not Ashes Ish or anything. It's to this man, but he ended up having be with her after they were divorced. And then had a child. That's a pagam to the family. So maybe that's the reason why we'll write it even b'shas erison no matter what. Okay. Rav Zera, Rav Abba, Bar Shilo, Rav Hamdunos, Sabo, Rav Ada Baravo, Rav Halach Rabbi Lezer. So the Halach is Rabbi Lezer. Who's Rabbi Lezer? Says Rashi, Shepoisel b'toifse Gittin Gezer Mishum Terev. Now when it comes to Gittin, he does not allow this at all because he's geyser. So Kari Rav Olei was read, Rabbi Lezer Tovina de Chachime, that he is the most praiseworthy among the wise people. Yafil b'shar shtaros nami. One saying, does that mean when it comes to other shtaros, that's also the din? Says Rashi, the mind of Paga Belezer, Rabbi Yehuda, V'asher b'taisei shtaros, Rav Nami halacha Belezer. Does he hold like the halachas like him also regarding other documents? But we learn that when it comes to a sharta didaini, when it comes to, says Rashi, kim ashtar, verified documents, demichtava mekamei, and it was written before delimisade sahade achasimas yadaihu psula. Says Rashi, what is this case? She'edim edim al ksav yadehim bebeistin. They testify regarding their own signatures in Beis Din. Beis Din kaisvin bo, and the Beis Din writes the following sentence: B'moisav tlasan, presence of three, Tavina v'asu ploini, these two edim came, Yasidu, and they testified, Achasimos Yodaihu, on their signatures, V'ashirinhi v'keminhu kedechazi v'choismin. And so they basically, that's what they wrote. So we say that psul alma mechse kashikra, hachanam mechse kashikra. How could you write the shtar mecher before it happened? It's a lie, right? So how could they have written this? How could we hold like Rabbi Lezer, therefore regarding shtar shtaros, that it's written before it took place? The leisim Rav Nachman, if let's say it was found in the garbage heap, says Rashi, it's not written for a woman at all. You sign it and give it kosher. So we're not chayish of sheker because it was signed l'shma, according to Rav Meir. And only he holds it a chasima karti. They only argue el Gittin nashim l'shma, because they hold that the writing has to be l'shma. When it comes to other documents, the ksiva doesn't have to be written l'shma. It's maybe just because of a gzera. If you have a loan that paid back his loan, he cannot use the same shtar again, because the whole issue is that shibud is gone. Says Rashi, even if, let's say, he paid back the loan the same day, he can't be reused. Even though there's no issue of a shtar muktam. Certainly, if, let's say, I have a shtar and I pay you $10,000, and then, let's say, a month later, say, oh, you still have that shtar? I need to borrow the $10,000 again. Definitely can't use it, because that's a shtar muktam. But if it was on the same day, it's an issue. Shikmar nimchol shibudo, says Rashi. Kishaparo, when you paid back that loan, ubatal hashtar, the shtar is considered worthless. So therefore, at that moment, that shtar no longer has the ability to be used, so you can't reuse it. Now says the Gemara, we're not concerned of the issue of sheker. Says Rashi, im nechtam al milvazu, if it was signed, even if it was written before, we don't care. The im bobiyom nechtam. So when it comes to shtar shtaros, there's no requirement according to anyone that it has to be written lishma. It's only because of Gittin that there's a machlokas whether the ksiva needs to be written lishma, and that gets into this whole question of the typhus and the tyrif. But when it comes to shtar shtaros, it's not an issue. So therefore, we're not concerned of mixik shikra when it comes to shtar shtaros. Okay, we're going to stop there. Let's look at question 12. Madua get mukdam min erison posel. So either because Shema Yechape al Bas Achais is going to have mercy on his niece, and he'll end up saying that the get was given earlier, before she had znus, or because Shema Yomer Gita Kodim Livna. The issue is, as we mentioned, that let's say it was B'shas Erison, but he ends up saying, I only want it to be Chal afterwards, once we get married, so that's a get Yoshan. It's not good, because otherwise, even though technically it was a good get, but people are going to think that it was written and given on the same day. And it was written and given on the same day, that means she obviously had relations with him afterwards. and therefore the get came before the child, and therefore it caused a pagam and mishpacha, and therefore for that reason, even b'shas erison we require the zman to be written on the document. Adkan.